Inside the Gun, a special gun gallery series that lets you experience artwork in the gun gallery collection through a chat with one of Kenyon's professors. I'm your host, Jody Kovach, the curator of academic programs at the gallery. And our special guest today is Professor of Political Science, Tim Speikerman. So thank you for being with us today, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And the topic of our discussion today is this fabulous painting by Laurie Hogin. The title is Peace. It's oil on canvas, and it was painted in 1991. It's a gift to the collection by Mr. and Mrs. Graham Gund. And I know that this is a painting that you've liked since I first arrived here and since I first got to know you. It was hanging up in the entryway, and you noticed it right away.
Yeah, I was walking up the stairs over at the entrance, and there was this gigantic painting, which immediately caught my attention. It's sort of striking. And sometimes when I go to museums and I'm in a big room, I look, which is the one painting in the room that sticks out to me that I want to go look at further. And on one side was a Chuck Close portrait of Hillary Clinton. And on the other side was an Alex Katz, who's one of my favorite painters. And I thought, wow, we have some really great stuff at this museum. So yeah, this is the kind of thing where you want to look a little bit more like what the heck is going on.
Exactly. Right, so this painting is really typical of Laurie Hogin's practice. She loves to paint animals in all of these kind of strange, sometimes violent situations. She shows them combating, fighting, struggling with one another. The animals, in this case birds, are anthropomorphized in a lot of ways. If we look closely, you can see their eyes don't look like bird eyes, they look like human eyes. And some of them are even baring their teeth. And they show facial expressions that look like something that we would see in sort of a theatrical representation of a struggle between humans. She also often draws from romantic traditions, different historical tropes in art history. We see this just in her use of oil painting at a very large scale, almost a monumental scale. She's looking too at modes of scientific display, like dioramas that you might see in a natural history museum. We see that come through in like the really highly rendered, almost scientific observational accuracy of these birds, but then this is combined with a lot of fantasy too. We see Baroque drama in this. This is like a theatrical stage-like setting, really strong dramatic diagonals and compositional structuring. So these are some things as an art historian that initially drew me to this painting. But Tim, as a political philosopher, what really intrigued you about this when you first saw it?
Well, I'm not sure if I was looking at it as a political philosopher, but after finding it just striking, I mean, it's sort of old-fashioned. You wonder what's going on. You wonder whether these birds are really human, or what kind of birds they are. That one looks like a reptile. But when you glance down at the title, Peace, to try to figure out what's going on here, it doesn't look very peaceful. Was my first thought, right? I did look up a whole bunch of birds' eyes, thank God for the internet, and they do sometimes look strikingly human. Although I had trouble deciding what kind of birds to look up, because it's not clear what these are. Swans, but there's something human about the whole thing, about the way that they're standing together, perched together. There's two different colors. It's almost like there's two teams. And I get the impression, maybe I'm totally wrong about this, that they've just frozen the scene, right? Like this is a pose to make it seem like, aha, we're at peace. I'm especially intrigued by these two. There's very still figures, which they seem to be in charge of things, and it's weird that two of them would be in charge on the different colored teams, but the other ones don't look peaceful. This I was wondering if that was sort of a take on the medical symbol.
Oh, yeah.
And she uses this in other pieces of art. Do no harm, which might tie into that. But I don't know, is this blood or just coloring on the bird?
I think it could suggest either. And I think as a compositional device, it works to, kind of balance the colors of the composition, use that as a structural element. But definitely, it's a way of expressing the violence.
And you have the sort of the circular, where it's all movement, and then it stops.
Yeah.
I don't know, here we have them twisted again, around one another, which, that doesn't seem like a peaceful image to me.
No, the title.
This looks like a dress, like it's like a court painting or something like that. So anyway, I just found that really interesting. And then we have the old-fashioned background, which is very serene, and that seems to provide a contrast to this. I like the fact that it has a fairly subdued color palette. That seems old-fashioned too, right? These sort of darker browns contrasted with the white. And she does later stuff that is, I don't care for it as much, but it's almost neon colors.
Yeah.
Just super, super bright. It has all the animals in the great detail. Some of them have little mushrooms around that look like the animals, they may have been magic, and the animals may have partaken. And in those backgrounds, you can see tracers, and sometimes plumes of smoke, like this is maybe after the Great War, and that the animals have somehow been affected by humans. Whereas this, I get the impression that we're supposed to think of these as humans.
I think so too. I think the theatricality of it that you've described really emphasizes that. And I like too how you've drawn out all of these tropes from different art historical traditions that she's invoking. And this is something that we had talked about when you used this for your Quest for Justice class.
Right, so we had a field trip to the museum, which the students were all excited about. And we came up with the idea, actually I thought of this after seeing this picture, that the students, I've noticed this in the last couple of years, and particularly in the last year, is that they kept asking, when are we going to read something from the 21st century? And this is a class where we started at the beginning of the year with Greek, 5th century Athens. Never was the answer. But it got me thinking that the students often have it. I mean, this is perfectly understandable. What about now? Right? What about what's contemporary? And when I saw this, I said, well, here's somebody, this is a contemporary art museum, and here's somebody who's referring quite obviously to past traditions in paintings. At first it looks like maybe a Charles Audubon, on birds, or it looks like, as you suggested, Baroque paintings, but she's thinking about the past. And so Jody went through the collection and got a bunch of things that somehow our contemporary artists were very much thinking about history or past forms in what they were creating. Well, we had Christo, who had wrapped the Bundestag, the German parliament building. There was a Kenyon graduate who did a portrait April and her daughter Sarah. She'd done a study of Muslim converts in America, and this is a pose of a mother and daughter that very much is supposed to look like Madonna and child.
Yeah.
And there were a number of other things along that vein. And the idea was just to see that the most up-to-date and the most current artists are sort of saturated with the past and always thinking about what came before them. So I don't know whether that was maybe a little too abstract to translate, but I figured if nothing else, they would get to see some really great art and to hear from Jody, who always has interesting things to say about things in our collection.
Well, I have one more question for you, because I think you always have interesting things to say about art too, and I know we talk about art a lot, and you visit.
I send Jody text pictures when I go to museums.
Right, Tim visits lots of museums when he travels, and most of the things I found that you send me are figurative works. And so I'm wondering, what do you find most intriguing about figurative painting today?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can answer that today, but that's interesting that you noticed that. I mean, I'm not one of those person who hates modern art, you know. I love abstract art. My first love was Kandinsky, I remember in high school. And I have abstract prints in my house, but I've always been drawn to figurative art. I don't know, I suppose I like people, and you wonder about the people, you know. And thinking back, it used to be considered, at least when I was in college, sort of throwback, or not current. And I think that's actually changed. Edward Hopper has never gone out of style.
Yeah.
And there's a stunning picture at the Columbus Museum of Art that you've probably seen of the woman who turns out to be his wife, sitting alone in a bed in a hotel room staring out the window. And there's something he has a lot of figures in his paintings, not all of them. And there's something kind of haunting about this modern alienation and individualism. A lot of the times the figures are alone. Another thing, I remember when I was in college, one of my classmates, I didn't really know him very well, but his father was Philip Pearlstein, who's a figurative painter who does nudes. And I remember thinking at the time, well, how can you do that? And he's still very popular. I mean, the human body is always of interest, and showing it, Lucian Freud, I think of making you think about these things a little bit differently. I like Alex Katz, the picture that we have here.
Right.
Just I think it's 1973. I can almost always spot if something's from the early 70s, out of pure nostalgia. That's my youth. And that captured, for me, a little bit what it felt like to be alive then. Captured a moment in time. So I don't know, there's a lot of great, I like Robert Bachtel with the sort of photorealist things, mostly because he likes cars, and I like cars. So I always find these things interesting, but it's not that I don't like abstract art. And I don't always know why I like any given painting. I have a little postcard in my office of an abstract painting by de Kooning, that's at the Art Institute in Chicago. And I look at it every day, and I have for years, and it gives me great pleasure. It's called Excavation, and I have no idea why.
Yeah.
There's something. The furthest I've gotten is it reminds me of music. But why exactly it does, and why that speaks to me, I don't know.
I really appreciate that comment, because I think one of the most spellbinding things about art is that we can love it and enjoy it and not be able to explain why. And I think that's my relationship with this painting too. I think it's really mysterious, and there's something about the mystery here that's really compelling.
Well, I think a lot of it, at least for me, is just pleasure.
Yeah.
You see something that strikes you. I mean, I like color. I get excited every time I see a cardinal. I don't know if everybody has that built in. I don't think that, you know, if this was a completely different picture expressing what we think might be the idea behind this, I don't know if I would have responded to it. But there's something about the creativity and the pleasure derived just from the beauty of something. That things don't always have to be meaningful in the way that we sometimes think of that in the classroom.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for sharing your appreciation and your insight into art with us. And thank you, Caroline Colbert, Director of Digital Content and Engagement, for filming and producing this, and Robin Goodman, Collections Manager, for making the art accessible to us. We'll see you next time on Inside the Gund.
Thank you.